Flores. He is a producer. He's an actor. He's been recurring on a little show called Queen of the South on, I believe, USA Network. He's been on a couple of other projects. He was a producer on my film, Lifelines. He's a producer and production designer on the Hazley animated series, as well as he plays a very key role, recurring role in the series. And like I said, and then he's also even got an opera background, so you could have seen him on stage in that, and we may even talk a little bit about everybody's backgrounds. He's also has been a previous live show guest on with Gunter in the past. I believe it was in our first season. He was on, it was either our first or our second season. He was on Inspired Change with some other very important guests. Anyway, so let's just dive right in, folks. We're talking about being mindful. We've got a crazy world today that we live in, and this is a non-political, show, but it's all about being mindful. It's about being caring. It's about, loving and helping one another and ways that we can inspire change. So, let me hand over the floor. First, DeVonna, you're up. Let's, tell me about little ways. Talk about inspired change and what you are doing to inspire change. And then, DeVonna.
Okay. Well, one of the things is that people think that you have to do something big and spectacular to inspire change, which is absolutely the opposite. It can be the teeniest, tiniest thing. A smile. A smile can change somebody's day, and people think, oh, that's trite, but it's true. When you smile or you do a good deed, and you do a good deed for somebody else, not only does the person that's getting the good deed done have a good serotonin release, but you do because you've just done something nice for someone, and then anybody that witnesses it also gets that serotonin release. And all you simply did was maybe say something nice, or held the door open, or whatever, or picked up something that dropped. And that one little tiny second of just being kind can, maybe she or he had a bad day or whatever, but you don't know. I just say you don't know what somebody else is going through. So if they're ugly or if they're crass, just try not to react to that, because it's about them, not you. And then you can inspire change by simply not reacting to the chaos that's in the world and finding that mindful spot inside yourself to just recenter and take care of you first. And once you manage to take care of you first, you can inspire all kinds of other change because you've done it within yourself. And once you grasp that, then the world is your oyster.
Thank you. Exactly. I mean, we see from, cries of racism and police brutality and elections, people are bullying each other over just the most simple things. I mean, you can't even go on social media to just communicate and even promote without someone getting offended because of whatever. And as I tell people, and I think in every day, I look at things, I said, when you're on one of my projects, I don't care what your ethnic background is. I don't care what your sexual orientation is. I don't care about who you voted for. We don't have to agree. But what we do have to do is just be human. And those are some of the things that Gunter talks about quite a bit on Inspired Change, is being mindful of others. Really, taking a look around you, your surroundings. Walk a mile in someone else's shoes. You don't know if that homeless person down the street is a drug addict. Maybe they look like it, but maybe they were an attorney who lost their job. Or maybe they got sick and they got stuck. And then maybe pride, if they do have family, maybe pride hasn't allowed, and they think, oh, I waited, but it's never too late. always reach out to the people you don't think might need it. Say, hi, how are you doing? You could, if you're wearing a mask, say, I'm smiling under here. I actually had someone the other day says, I think you're smiling. I said, really? I am. And he goes, how'd you know? And he goes, I see it in your eyes. When you smile, you can tell someone is smiling. If because your eyes reflect in your face. And so those are just, it's about the little things. So Kristin, I'd like you to share a little bit of your 2 cents on inspiring change in others and being mindful to start out.
Well, I think everything begins with self. You can't change anybody else. You can only change the way you react to them. Plato once said, know thyself, which Cicero years later came back and said, these words uttered by Plato must come from the gods, because no man could ever have thought of them. I think about that, wow. It is true, you can't change anyone else. Change begins with oneself, and change is one of the most difficult things that a person can do. You get a child in a family situation. Every child in there has their little role that they play. And this one's the bad seed over here, and always gets, everything this kid does is wrong. It sets up a mindscape for these people that they just grow up and stay there. So I think in order to do some change, you start with yourself. You have to figure out where you're going, where you're coming from, and then you've got to figure out a way to make that change measurable. You have to tie it to reality. I could say I want to lose 100 pounds by Friday. Oh, it's not going to happen. It's got to be your change, your idea or your goal must be tied to reality. It's something that is attainable, and it should be something measurable. So we say, well, I can, for this moment, for this 1 minute, this hour, this day, not eat any sugar, or whatever that might be. And it's a very nice, measurable thing that we can begin to change. And I think the other thing that really bothers me about conversation today, in the world as we know it now, is when someone is talking, the person that they're talking to is already beginning to figure out their answer. Rather than listening to what they're saying, or what the person is saying, they're already figuring out how to refute and make their position known. I think part of mindfulness is where DeVonna went with it too. In the beginning was stopping and having a neutral response to what you're hearing. Don't judge it immediately. Give it a moment to act neutrally, to think about what they're saying. We're so quick. We jump in with our own point of view. And if we could just stop and neutralize that, we might do better and be more respectful of other people's ideas. That's my bit.
Thank you, Kristin. You touched on so many important things, and it just even going back to some of the quotes from Plato and that comparison, it's simple things. It's simple things. It's common sense. And why is it so hard for people to grasp onto that? And we're gonna touch on that. So hold that thought, and we're gonna jump into that on the next bit. But you even brought up when you first started your topic to talk about. You said self-care. That brings me to, I didn't even mention that in the promos for today's show, is being mindful and well-being and inspiring change, and not just others but yourself. It all starts within. If you're not happy or you're angry or toxic, it's going to reflect. You're going to reflect that energy on other people. And so self-care is so important. Even if you can't afford to go have a spa day or go do this, it's little things. And we'll talk a little bit about things you can do for self-care that might help on that as well. So Andrew, I'd like you to share a little bit on your thoughts on how we can inspire change and mindfulness and well-being in the world as well.
Well, I for me, I think about an experience that happened. I'm from Waller, Texas, about 50 miles northwest of Houston, and I had some neighbors. They're from Compton, California. They're black, beautiful people, just gorgeous people. A couple of years ago, I was having a septic system put in, and so the man that was putting it in, he says, "Can I tell you something?" And I said, "Sure. What's up?" He goes, "I'm the most racist SOB that you will come across, but I will do anything for that lady next door." And he was referring to my neighbor next door. So right there, you could have knocked me over with a feather, because it gives the reality that people, no matter how they be perceived as being most hateful or whatever, or racist, that people can change. And I thought that was just the most interesting statement that he had ever made to me. And people can change. And where a person may have done heinous things, doesn't mean that they can't get forgiveness, that would be from a higher power. And it's just incredible how things can change, people can change. And that inspired me to help me remember that no matter what a person has done or what their past does not equal your future. And so you go and take that as a lesson for yourself, hopefully to inspire you to do better.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just that little thing on how you're making a difference from someone that rightfully admitted how racist they are, but you planted a seed. There's little differences. There's ways that we can do things, and it's like touching on so many different things. And before we jump into the self-care, I said, okay, guys, hold that thought. I'm multitasking, being the producer, not used to always being that. So I'm not taking my usual notes as usual. What was it, someone we were going to step into, I think, before we jumped into self-care? Does anybody remember? Show of hands. So it's okay if we're live. We can make mistakes a little bit. DeVonna, do you remember what it? Okay, I can't hear you. Are you muted?
Self-care is the next thing that we were going to talk about.
Okay, I thought there was something before, but maybe it'll come back to me. Okay, so let's just dive kind of into starting within. And that's a good point, because of what Andrew said earlier about the guy that admitted that he was the most racist out there. Probably not. It was probably hard for him to do that. Who knows? But he admitted it, and I'm going, okay. But let's start with things that you can do because Gunter would probably touch on this as well. Things you can do to take care of yourself, to make yourself a better person. Because if you're gonna, and that could be a matter of being, practicing empathy. And when you're practicing mindfulness, let's start with DeVonna. Talk a little bit about steps to self-care before you actually can impose, well-being and mindfulness on others.
Well, you bring up a good point. It does have to start with yourself first. I remember back in the 90s, I was a big drama queen. I mean, I really was. Everything was so dramatic.
And you went into acting? Really?
That's why, yeah. Because one too many people accused me of acting when I was being real, So I said, well, somebody's seeing this in me. I might as well see where it'll go. And here I am. But anyway, no, seriously, though, self-care is real important. And at one point, we're not everybody's taught this. This is something that now, with the dawn of psychology not being, in its birthplace, but actually well established now, there's more data and there's more knowledge on this. And if, it's just common sense. If you're not in a healthy place for yourself, that you can't go forward where you want to go. So Kristin made a good point. tie your goals to reality. Also, make your goals small and achievable at first. Don't set, you might want to be Superwoman, but you're not going to put on the gold bracelets first. So, you've got to start somewhere. So start with small, attainable goals that will make you happy that you've done it. So you always wanted to meditate, but you've never done it. Okay, well, start 5 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be a big commitment, but it is whatever small commitment you're making, it is the hugest commitment because it's to yourself. And if you keep your commitment to yourself, you can make any change that you want to make. It might take you a while. You might need help from other people, but it can be achievable. I used to be bedridden. I now can walk. Things can happen. My whole health system was shutting down. Through diet, I regained my health. So there are a lot of options out there, but my advice is, be happy with you and get you to a place where you're happy with yourself. And that doesn't mean the end. That means throughout the journey, because it's the journey that counts, not the destination, because you're always going to be changing your destination based on what your new desires and hopes are.
Exactly. I mean, they always say you can't, how you expect to help others if you don't help yourself. And it really does. It's like, if I'm not to be stereotypical California, but doing things like yoga, it actually makes you feel good. I don't like the hot yoga, Bikram yoga, or whatever they call it. I like the vinyasa because it's like you get into that stretch and it's slow. Or I took Tai Chi, which is a very slow martial arts, but it's like you're balancing the mind. And then we have a wellness room here at the studio, and I went in there and got into a zero gravity and put on the lavender incense in the room and zero gravity massage chair. And then I put on one of the transcendental meditation. And some people will even joke and say, well, that's a cult, and everybody knows I'm a fan of director David Lynch. But I'm like, no, it's not. It's a deep form of meditation. And it's just a mind-body thing. It's you don't even have to go that deep in meditation. Just go find a quiet place. Or, I was on Clubhouse the other day, which, by the way, we got to be doing another Clubhouse again soon. But I was on Clubhouse in a mindful room, and one person mentioned, and this is something I've done, and it is a form of meditation. One example, some things that I like to do is when you're just by yourself, you're not with your, maybe my hubby's doing something in the house or he's resting, or you just go, I take a lot of like long, thoughtful walks. Sometimes we do walks together, but sometimes I just like to go, that's a self-care. Look around at nature. Even if you're walking in the city, I do a combination of nature / it's called like a city park hike, where, you go through the greenery, maybe stop, take your shoes, walk barefoot in the park. Little things, feel it. It's the little things. You don't have to go on this big excursion. You could just walk and people watch. Even in the times of COVID, it's been hard. More than ever, we need that just to get out. If you got to wear a mask, if you're in a state where you still have to have the mandate, big deal. That's another thing. People fussing at each other about to mask or not to mask, or vax or not to vax. Do what is right, but be respectful of those around you. Someone the other day, I think it was in Europe, one of an actor that I've worked with, he was, he's been in quite a few films, and he was telling me about how someone on a bus said, like, please put your mask on, and the person got killed, literally. And I'm going, what? Over wearing a mask because you don't agree with it, you're gonna go into your conspiracy theories or whatever. If that's not, don't impose that on someone else. I said that person has deep-seated issues. Same thing, little it's little things. And just back to the self-care, one of the things you can do if you have a car, go take a drive. Sometimes I get on one of these little e-bike moped scooters that they have in LA. Those are fun to ride. And, I'll just jump on one of those. I have a convertible, so sometimes I'll pop the top down and take a drive. If you don't have that, if you got a sunroof, open that up. Or just open all the windows if you don't have a sunroof or a convertible. Just get in the car and drive. And just maybe put some music on and just sing to your favorite tunes. Do whatever. That's part of self-care. Find what works for you. What works for you might not work for somebody else. But it's the little things. So, Kristin, moving along, you're the one that brought up the self-care, and that brings us to the topic. Talk about. I'd like to hear a little of your insights on what maybe what you do for self-care to make things better, or what others do. Take it away.
Okay. Back in the Civil War, there was a general, and there were battles going all around him. And so he jumped on his horse, and his sergeant said, "Sir, which way are we going?" He said, "We're going north, south, east, and west." Needless to say, he didn't get very far. And that's the thing about change. It's hard. And self-care is hard. And did you know that we are the only species on Earth that can be aware of being aware? If you go into mindfulness, you begin to realize, you begin the breathing, you go through this, and you're aware of, and then eventually you become aware of being aware. And no other animal can do that. Nobody can do that but us. We're very special in that realm. But changing ourselves is hard. And there was a workshop once, and the leader said, he gave an assignment. He said, "All right, I'm going to give you each an index card. I want you to write the story of your life in 5 chapters on an index card." One woman wrote, "I was walking down, chapter 1, I walked down the sidewalk and I fell in a hole. And I struggled to get out of the hole, and I didn't think I'd ever get out, but I did." Chapter 2, I was walking down the sidewalk and I fell in a hole. It was really hard to get out of the hole. I struggled, but I did it. Chapter 3, I was walking down the street, I fell in a hole. But this time, it was different because I had learned how to get out of the hole. Chapter 4, today I walked down the street and there was a big hole, but I walked around the hole. Chapter 5, today I took a different path. That's what we all learn, but it takes time. We're going to fall in that same hole over and over. And each time we fall into that hole, we're going to learn from it, and it's going to get a little bit easier, just a little bit easier, until we no longer make those same mistakes. Some of that is just time. Sometimes, well, like Miranda said, you've got to take a walk. You've got to become aware of being aware. You've got to stop and think who you are. And once you realize who you are and the great power you have within you, eventually you get it all worked out.
Okay. Can y'all hear me, guys? I accidentally made one little error, but I think it should be okay. It was a technical difficulty. Are you there? Okay. I think y'all can't hear me, but the team can hear me. We had an issue. Can y'all hear me? Raise your hand if you can hear me. Okay. I think someone muted. That's what happens when it goes live. I was adjusting. We were having there was a problem in the studio, and we finally got the mics were adjusted right. Well, just now the big monitor in the studio powered itself off when I was just trying to turn it up. So I thought I couldn't hear. So I'm going to power that back on. So if everybody's got their volume on, I think we're back loud and clear. And anyway, so back on the subject, Kristin, you made such a good point. On just being mindful and talking about, the quotes of the, like the self-care and those little things that are so important. on that. Let's see. I think next we were going to go to Andrew. Can you hear me? Just say, a few words on self-care.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. I was thinking there was a problem while I was adjusting. So moving along, I'd like to hear your thoughts on self-care as well. And we'll go ahead and let you kind of just elaborate. Like I said, Kristin, that was such a good point on what you brought up about, caring for yourself, and even going back to the, a Civil War comparison. I was going, wow, she goes deep, but it's amazing, and people need to know this. So, Andrew, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what we can do, and even share an example of what you do for self-care when you're, inspiring change and mindfulness in others.
Well, I was going to say, we all at some point get depressed or something brings us down. A lot of it, sometimes we may watch a little bit too much TV, like the news, what's going on in the world. It can really affect you. I mean, if you're constantly looking and looking, it's going to affect.
Okay, hold on, Andrew, just one moment. We had an issue with the TV here. It's acting kind of weird. I don't know why. So I'm gonna interrupt for just a moment. We had a technical difficulty that occurred, and it shut you off. So just one moment to our listeners. I think we're gonna be back live. Oh, and just so funny, as the screen came back on, it said moving mountains across the bottom of the screen. And I thought, I felt like I had to move mountains just to get the tech back in shape. But that just kind of goes a little bit on what you're talking about, what we see. I think the last thing we said before you kind of went radio silent was about like watching the news, and some people have been kind of tuning it off, but yet you still want to be aware. You can talk a little bit about what you do, where you're still informed, but yet kind of going in that direction, finding a way to move mountains, as our tech screen like to say. Anyway, Andrew, I'm going to let you go ahead and continue on with your thought. Proceed.
Yeah, it's just it's good to be informed. Get all the information that you need, and then you move on, get away from it. For what I like to do is, of course, I've been having fun, shopping at the back of the store, just finding these furniture pieces. To me, that's very therapeutic. Keeping yourself moving is very therapeutic, no matter what it is, whether you're walking or maybe even creating art. I tell a lot of people, because they ask me, because I'm also an artist, how do you get these images down? And I tell them, I say, well, you know what? Don't worry about it. Just get you some gloves, get you some paint, some acrylic paint, and get you a canvas and just play with it. It's not so much about, what you can create or try to create. It's about, just enjoying the process. And you'd be surprised what comes out after that. I remember watching a lady when I was a little boy on 60 Minutes, and she was suffering from depression. And what she started doing was doodling, just taking a pen and just started drawing. And that helped her depression to a degree, a big time. And in fact, people wanted her artwork, and so they started buying her artwork because of that. So keeping yourself moving, no matter if it's you exercising your body or reading books, doing something besides what's the norm, watching television. Sometimes I think we sit in front of the TV hours and hours and hours, and nothing productive comes out of it. And so I'm doing my best. My part I'm trying to do is read more books and be more creative and paint and set up sets. That sort of thing.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, Andrew, you hit on a number of things. Just the power of picking up a book. The other day, I've always worked a lot with promoting other authors. Always been a filmmaker, but I was a publicist at one time, and so I'm thinking, I didn't see none of the New York Times list on this book. I saw a book It was a fiction book, and it looked like a touching story. The cover kind of drew me in. I was in Amazon Books. I only went into the Amazon Books, which I love bookstores just to look around. And the sales girl was so bubbly and happy, and we were having a fun conversation. And she was like, "Hey, we're doing a thing this week about if you buy this book, we're going to actually donate it to a homeless shelter or a schools where a kid in need might need it." So I picked a book that I thought, oh, and I said, you know what? I want to buy this book for me. So I bought one for them to donate, and then I bought one, and it was actually kind of a children's book, actually, but it told a woman's story of as a kid. It was based on her true story in a children's tome about escaping, like during the time of the Vietnam War, and how they escaped and their journey. And I was like, wow, So, and then as I'm walking around, I thought, okay, maybe I'll pick an adult book, one for more adults. And I was looking around and I saw a book, and I go, huh. Okay, didn't see the advertisements. It just spoke to me, and so okay, I'm getting this one. Those are like sometimes just going in, find a place to make you happy. I go into a bookstore and I'm like, oh, cool. Or I go out in nature, whatever. Go to a movie, painting. Without saying too much about our show, Andrew, being that you've taken on the production design of Hazley, and you're also in it as well. Turning this little tiny, this house looks like a dollhouse that we're shooting all the live action. I'm thinking, I don't see how a family's going to fit in there. I could make it work, but it's so tiny, but it's like, it's perfect, And then it's like these little things. And then you said you go over there and you while you're fixing the house, it's kind of like a painting oasis. You said you go there to paint. So a lot of the paintings on the walls of our Hazley's house in the show are paintings by Andrew. I think with all the things in the world, I'm thinking, oh, to de-stress, you paint. Which, by the way, I have 2 of the paintings that were featured in one film and one in another pilot that we just did that Andrew was in, hanging up in my office in the studio. And people are like, oh, cool, I like your paintings. I like your posters on the wall. Make things. If it's decorating, it's designing. Those are there's so many things. And encouraging the arts. If you're more into science and analytical, and you're not really into the whole painting thing, you never know, that could even turn into something. If you like science, if you like to get in and have it, as long as the discussion is healthy, go create, find a way. There's different ways you can create things. And that's just all part of like self-care. Like you said, a girl, she started painting. Next thing you know, people want to buy it, and she's got a gallery show. There's just the power of different, as humans. It goes back to, Gunter did a series of the show on resilience. Be resilient. That's also part of being mindful. Another thing I kind of wanted to touch on is sometimes people say, well, I can't be positive all the time. Is it okay not to be? I said, I was talking to someone the other day that was going through something, and I said, yeah, it's okay. You don't have to be, oh, you're positive. That's not realistic. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a happy-go-lucky person, but we all have our down days. But if you start reflecting, talk to a good friend if you need to work something out. That's also a way of self-care. So one thing is, sometimes I think in one of our last live shows with Gunter, we had a guest from the audience came on and said, what do you do? Is it okay? Is it like too much? Is there such thing as too much inspiring change? Is there too much being positive? Well, no, not really. You can be positive and be realistic. And so, DeVonna, let's go, like, we're going to go back around the room again. Talk about a little bit on, if someone says, well, you can't be positive all the time. What do I do, with this going on and this bothers me, and, oh, I can't even watch the news anymore, and how can I be positive all the time? And that's not healthy to inspire change all the time. So let's talk a little bit on that. Give maybe a little your insight on, is it such thing as too much inspiring change or too much positivity?
No, because what positivity is, it's a way to quiet the monkey mind. As humans, we have a million conversations going on in our brain with ourselves about our opinions and how we feel and how just about a million different aspects of a million different things. So we could have a ton of traffic going on in our head, and a lot of people call that the monkey mind. And you have to quiet the monkey mind. And there's all kinds of ways to do that, but the best way is to focus on one thought. And if that thought is not the thoughts that you're hearing, because all of those are negative, then what I usually do, if I'm feeling bombarded by negativity of my own, I will focus on, well, what do I want? What am I thinking? So I acknowledge what I'm thinking. Oh, I'm thinking that I suck right now. Is that the truth? No, that's my opinion. Okay, so then I'll talk it out in my head. Well, what is my positive affirmation? What can take me from thinking negatively about myself, which is just an opinion and not the truth? If I ask any friend, they'll tell me that that's not true. So what do I do? Because we're the most detrimental to ourselves. We tear ourselves up. And we think little of ourselves when everyone else is thinking highly of ourselves. So we give ourselves the least credit, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to learn not to be megalomaniacs or anything, but to be happy where we are. And if we're not happy where we are, taking a small step to make it different. We touched on meditation. Meditation is another way to quiet the monkey mind. And people don't understand that, if they haven't ever experienced it. But like you said, Miranda, just go into a quiet room. You don't have to, chant or listen to a biofeedback tape. Those things help, but you don't have to if you're uncomfortable with that. I started meditation by simply laying down flat on my back on a bed and breathing deeply and counting to 10 with each breath, if I could get to 10, and exhaling deeply and doing the same thing and trying to make my exhale count longer than my inhale count. It's that easy. And if you do that and focus on your breathing, you can quiet the monkey mind. And in 5 minutes, you'll get up feeling refreshed. And you can inspire change in others because they're going to see this calmness about you. You just have to walk your talk and live your example and be who you want to be. And what makes you happy? What truly makes you happy? Go for that and make your small steps toward that direction. And then you will always inspire change in others because it's just unavoidable.
Yeah, exactly. And when you said, and I put up in the little chat that we have available to all us guests in here, that brings me to, you talk about quiet the monkey mind. And when I directed my feature that's going to be out later this year, Lifelines, it deals with mental health. It deals with a character who's bipolar, because I've known people who've dealt with that. Me personally, not really understanding totally what they go through. I can only see from the outside. But I wanted to bring awareness to that. So we have a scene where the main character is talking to his psychologist, an actual psychologist that seems to be working for him. And you talk about little things too about listen, when you say about focusing on your breathing, you also listen. That can also mean just listen to your breath. I actually had a person told me when, meditating, just quiet room, lay down and listen to yourself. That's it. Or as I'm about to say, you said quiet the monkey mind, quiet the noise. Because there's so much going on in our lives, whether it's what's in the world. Lord knows I've got a lot of plates spinning. So, yeah, this DeVonna goes, does she ever? But sometimes you just need to take 2 minutes, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or water or whatever, and go sit by yourself, take a breath, even if it's a minute. Sometimes that 1 minute will go a long way. It's the little things. Quiet the noise. And I have the psychologist in the movie, and when people watch it, they'll see that, and she's like, and we have the scene where the actor, the character, he's kind of fidgeting, and he's sitting there on the couch in the psychologist's office in that scene of the film, and he's kind of trying to adjust himself. He's bipolar. He's trying to focus the different sides of him, and she goes, Ethan, I want you to quiet the noise. And then we kind of go into kind of a trippy flashback kind of thing where we fade out to where you just hear her voice, and then it's just I just went radio silent in the scene where it's kind of an abstract photo where it's like he's feeling the quiet. And yeah, you may have a relapse. Are they going to get better or are they going to get worse? Everybody's going to have ups, days, and downs. But if you quiet the monkey brain, you quiet the noise, take a moment. That's so key in the self-care deal. And it's just like I said, it just shows you, as we're talking, one person will say something and I'm like, oh my God, you nailed it on the head. You brought up quiet the monkey brain. I say quiet the noise. It's the same thing. Get out of your head for a moment. And even something literally, our listeners can't see our video chat, but, I noticed DeVonna, I said, you've got a sparkly cup you're drinking out of. And I'm going, something like as simple as sparkles can happen. Since the pandemic, I went on my first, I got a chance to have my first spa day, and I'm like, sparkle nails, sparkle toes, I'm even wearing sparkly shoes,
Sparkles make me happy.
Yeah, and DeVonna's got a sparkly cup. I also have my giant, friend show size. Oh yeah, with a D on it, with your D, you're owning it. Little things, those are important. And so, yeah, exactly. So those are just the little things that you can do to make things better. That it's just, there's little things that just make you happy. It could be painting a wall. Lord knows, we're about to go into Kristin's moment on the same topic here. But I go, I said, every time you turn around, I see a post, I'm thinking, they rearranged the house again. You bought a new couch you like. You're like, what's making, you said something spoke to you about buying a tea cart. Something that's going to make, the little things like that are simple. If it feels like it's gonna, it's not acquire. Some people say, well, that's just acquiring stuff, and well, no, it's not. If it's called treating yourself. There's different ways to enhance that. So, like I said,
adds to the quality of your life.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to go, my husband will tell me. He goes, well, you know what? If you see a shirt or you want, I've known people who, when they've got married, they're like, it's one thing to watch your money and watch what you spend, and I don't go bonkers on things, but they'll be like, you've earned it, you deserve it, go buy that. And I'm like, I'm blessed to have that kind of people you surround yourself. I've known people in abusive situations where you can't go out, you can't go here, and I'm like, and that makes it challenging. Even if you are in one of those situations and you don't know how to get out of it, there's ways you can even quiet that noise, and maybe eventually you'll get out of that situation. We'll kind of touch towards the tail end on dealing with adversity thrown in, but just to further continue on the kind of the quiet the noise and the different ways on that topic. Okay, Kristin, I brought you up already a little bit, but I'm going to let you kind of tackle on your 2 cents.
Okay. I do not have monkey mind. I don't. I have a drunken monkey on cocaine that lives in my head. It is insane in there. Don't walk a mile in my shoes. Spend a day in my head, you'll never be the same. What's really helped me was meditation. And I couldn't ever do it. I just couldn't sit there quietly and listen to myself breathe. That is equivalent to navel gazing. It's just pointless. then I started watching Deepak Chopra on YouTube, and he uses a mantra with it, which was extremely helpful for me. Just a simple Hindi word or Sanskrit word, and it really, for me, it does tone down the monkey. There's something I think that's really important to talk about, though, and that is, so many people get so down. I listen on Facebook every day. I watch these people, and they don't want to live anymore. They're so down. They're so depressed. They've given up. They're in despair. And to those people, I would say, I did not find my life until I was past 65 years old. I didn't have a life of my own. I was my husband's cheerleader. I was my children's cheerleader. I was the cheerleader for all their friends. But there was no me. I was mom. I was wife. I was everything to everybody. So many of us are like that. At 65, on a lark, I decided to write a book. It's just a joke, a parody on old westerns. It was so simple. And from that point, my life changed. And here I am with Miranda, I'm with DeVonna, I'm with Andrew, and I never thought, I'm a simple Hoosier housewife. How did I get here? But if I had at any point given up and just stopped, like so many people want to just say, I don't want to go on anymore, I would never have had this experience. Patience with yourself is so healing, and you just don't know what's ahead. Never ever give up, because you don't know. This is the beauty of life. It's just so beautiful, because you don't know. It's a surprise. There'll be a lot of bad ones, but you never know when that big one, that beautiful one, is going to hit. And for me, it wasn't until now. I'm 70 years old, and I'm living a life I never thought I could dream of. So you've got to hang in there. No matter what you do, you hang in there long enough, it'll be okay.
Yeah, you found a way to quiet your noise, to get that monkey to get off the coke. You found a way to do that. And hey, you became an author out of it. You became a writer. You unleashed an inner side of you didn't think probably existed. You always had the creativity, but maybe not sure how to channel it. You never know what you're going to unlock. I mean, this is so insightful just to hear everybody's stories, and we share little bits of ourselves, because you don't know. Someone might have a similar situation, and ways to do, without judgment, not being afraid to express yourself, and don't think, because like I said, when you say, oh, walk a mile, in my head, I think, Kristin, we were talking the other day, and I said, okay, you can walk around in my head, but don't knock anything loose, because I have it's kind of an organized chaos in there, because I've got, can't go into the subject, but, when you're writing stuff, finding the light in the darkness, that's the motto for Nortainment, You surround yourself with positivity. You learn how to channel it. It's okay to be down in the dumps. I rarely get depressed, but we all get a moment where we don't feel our best, and it's okay. It's okay. But don't wallow, and there's a lot of people, like during the pandemic and the lockdown, and it's been crazier here in California, and especially LA, that for more than for others. Like if you're in Texas or Florida, they were just like opening up immediately without caution, so I'm like, one thing that worried me was, when it came to the holidays, and the governor of California, like, okay, they stopped outdoor dining. We went back into like a semi-lockdown where there was no outdoor dining, there was nothing, and I'm thinking, okay, the holidays tend to be a time when people get depressed, And where I was worried was the part where, there's people who do get depressed, people who are bipolar, people who might not. Sometimes people say, well, they know they could call me. How often do people not call? If you have a loved one that died, I learned this a long time ago as a kid when someone said, oh, call us if you need anything. Do they call? No. Just go. Don't tell someone that. Just say, we love you. I'm here for you. And then, you know what? When you get home, if you want to go and, whip up something or go buy a dessert or bring them a piece of pie or just go sit and have a cup of coffee and it said, hey, I came over. I know you didn't ask me to, but I just had that feeling. That's practicing empathy because that person's going through and you don't know if they lost a spouse or a loved one or whatever. Sometimes these people who, especially living in Los Angeles, people who might not be married or have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever, or friends or roommates where they're not surrounded by people, they live alone, they're out here making their dream happen, and then they're like, sometimes just going to a restaurant just talking to the waiter, even if it's sitting outdoors because of the pandemic, that makes a difference. Sometimes they'll just have a conversation, and then you take that away because it's safety and health, but I'm like, couldn't we have found a way? Because how many suicides might have happened? We don't hear about that. And maybe the news was hiding it because the news needs to quiet their noise, because there's the media stirring hate and, and it's just crazy. And you can blame it on politics. Yes, maybe that contributes. But that all being aside, there's just so many things that we have to, care about, and just meditate. So, that leads me to Andrew. Let's you touch a little bit on that. We've got one more topic before we kind of wrap up this call. This on air. It's not really a call because we are on the air. Because I'm actually seeing we've got quite a few listeners on some of the stats. Let's just Andrew. You talk a little bit about your perspective on this section of the conversation.
Well, again, it's funny because, like I said, there's so much tension going on in the world. And yes, we could be quick to judge, so-and-so this or that, whatever it may be. But I guess, just looking and just kind of observing instead of just trying to throw your 2 cents in as far as comments and stuff like that. Just wait till everything comes out, and then maybe you'll be able to get what's going on. As far, that's on that perspective, of limiting yourself with the news. Get whatever information you need, then get out. And then for the healing process, like I said, you can do so many things. You keep yourself moving. Like I said, whatever gives you that therapy, whatever gives you that healing. Sometimes, believe it or not, like what I've done is I've went and bought food just at random, not trying to brag or anything, but for the homeless people. And it's just, I just say, hey, it's between me, you, and God, whatever that does to make you kind of heal. Sometimes you giving is what makes you heal. Being able to be more sympathetic, being able to step in that person's shoes, what they may be going through. So, a person that might be very salty, they may be going through something very rough. So who knows? What we're just thinking they're just being a jerk. Many things, like with painting, for me, I enjoy it. Like I said, you just get gloves. You don't have to make an image. You can just play with the paint, and something will come out. And I think that's why children's art is so beautiful because it's so innocent. It comes from the minds of, innocent. It's so real. And so I think we're on this journey, and we continue to try to look for ways to improve ourselves. To make ourselves happy, to make us at peace with ourselves. Sometimes the past, we all have past that are not good, but we try to do it in one form or another. I'm also dabbling in writing myself. I've worked on now chapter 2 of a potential book, just to see go with it. It's based on my life, but changing the characters a bit.
Yeah. You're just going to take creative license in your own life, to protect the innocent and the not so innocent. But I always say that because it's like, I really could. They always joke around when you're a writer. They're like, "You sure you want to marry or date a writer? Because you might end up in a story. Don't worry, I'll change the names. Although I should expose you for what you did. You traumatized me." And you say, "But by the way, you can always tell that person, that character over there?" I'd go, "Oh, the crazy one? Yeah, that's you." But no one else is going to know that but us. But that's you. That character, you inspired that character. That person might look at you and you're like, "Yeah, that's what happens." But hey, it's... Huh? Did someone say something? Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's just so many different things, that you do to get better and little things. So I want to touch just a little bit on this part. This will probably be our last kind of round, and then we're going to do just a final wrap-up conclusion after this. So this will be our second to the last, and then we'll kind of wrap. We got about about 10 or 20 minutes here. So this is for those, just to kind of end the part on someone in a bad situation. And like I said, as I mentioned, as a disclosure, in this session of Inspired Change, it's just regular people offering help and well-being. Gunter is our psychologist, but you know what? There's all things that we can do, and there's some people that really do, they need to see help. They need to have someone to talk to that's a professional, but there's always people that won't do it. Even with interventions, or some people, they just won't. They'll ignore you. They'll bash you, and you're like, "I did everything I could." But, and you hope, well, maybe one day they will. But that's one way too. But then there's also, my thing is just trying to be there for people. Be observant. Be mindful of your surroundings. If if you see something or you have a feeling that something's wrong, look at the signs. We had some guests the other day. It was some filmmakers that did it won a bunch of festival awards called Strawberry Cake. And it was about, they filmed it during the pandemic, and it was all on Zoom. And they had this, strawberry cake was a code word for one of the person she was going through domestic violence. Showed her, like, under her bed, she would pack, it starts out where the husband was, like, mentally abusive. And I don't even know if he was hitting her too, but it was like, later, she's like, "I need that strawberry cake recipe." And then the friend goes, "Well, I don't bake." And then the other friend goes, "I've got a recipe." And they go, No, I really want the strawberry cake was a code word. And she put a note out there, "If I ever say that, that's a code word." Sometimes that's what people use. It doesn't have to be strawberry cake. It could be just something simple. You might know that person that isn't a gardener, but they're like, "Can you tell me what you do to care for the roses?" Care for the roses could be a phrase. Anything, Find something that could be a common ground. It might be hard to get, but listen to those signs. And then, like I said, in the film, the girl got it, and she's like, "Okay, just 1 minute." And she got up to, like, maybe go make a call. Because it was a pandemic, and, people were worried about being locked down into someone in a domestic situation. Whether it's male and female, or, it could be the woman being abusive. Domestic violence is a two-way street, whatever situation. It could be a same-sex situation. It could be a transgender abuse, whatever. It could be child abuse. Look at the signs of people around you, it could be a slight change. Some people are good at hiding it. As humans, you don't want people to see that vulnerable side of you. But, one thing as we go around on this last round robin here, talk about some resources. If there's a hotline, a website, something you can go to, offering advice on getting out. and maybe some clues on finding the signs of helping someone that, like I said, they might be positive, but then maybe there's something deeper, and you need, how can we be mindful to help somebody? And, without mentioning names, you can mention an example of maybe how you help somebody, maybe something yourself, whatever. That's what it is. It's about, that's one way to inspire change, is being mindful of our surroundings, and not just on us and helping ourselves, but also taking care of others, and so forth. So, DeVonna, you had some comments and you had some things you wanted to share, and a little bit to touch on that area of
being a survivor of domestic violence, and having had a partner who was an addict. I had to seek help, and people had to seek to help me. So I say be available. I had my best girlfriend at the time watch my back so I could pack my car so I could flee the state, because I'd had a panic attack for the first time in my life. I was no longer in control of my body, and I had this little being that I was responsible for. So I ran, fight or flight. And I've never been one to run. But the reality is sometimes that's what's best. Now, I talked to the person that I've had these experiences with previously. We're on good terms now. That took 20 years. So some things we expect it to happen right away. It doesn't always. But if you're in a domestic violence situation, or someone that's in a situation, the best thing to do is just to, if you're an affectionate person, put your arms around them, say, I'm here for you. I know you're having a rough time. I'm not sure exactly what it is, because I don't live your life, but I'm here for you. You need me, you want to go for a cup of coffee, you want to say nothing to me, that's fine. You just need to go somewhere, just call me, I'll be there. And as long as you're there for the people that you care about, they need that support, and they can help rise themselves out of the situation. I called the United Way Helpline, and that's one of the things that I tell anyone and everyone. The United Way Helpline is a clearinghouse of the community's resources. So I called them in Texas, I've called them in Florida, and so depending on what your needs are, they've helped me find a church that was giving parenting classes and maternity clothes when I was unexpectedly pregnant. They have helped me get attached to a program in Houston, the George something, not Bush, but somebody else, George Walker, is a very famous black man, and this program was designed for women who had children, who were in domestic violence situations, that could not afford their first month's rent and their deposit. And they set me up with towels and an apartment, and helped me find the apartment and get me all set up. And I got out of the situation that I was in, and ultimately, like I said, I had to flee the state, because just getting an apartment in the same city wasn't far enough away. So call the United Way Helpline. Let them know what you're looking for. I need dog food. I need food for myself. I need, whatever it is, your situation. If you're desperate or not desperate, and you don't want to be desperate, reach out to the United Way. They're there because they want to help. They want to help make a difference, and they want to help inspire change in your life if you're in need of it. Vice versa. If you're able to give.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And DeVonna, and thank you for sharing your story on the air with our listeners, because you just never know what someone might be going through. You never know that this is that there's something that can be done, and it's like I said, the United Way Helpline. There's that. For that. Then there's other sources as well. If you can't always call the cops, you can't, some people are afraid of that. A friend can do it for you, or send someone to kind of, I need you, me and my husband are going to stop by and we'll watch, and okay, he's going to be gone. Okay. Even if they happen to come back and they leave work early, or wherever it is they go during the day, that spouse or abuser, that person just said, okay, I will be there. You know, even if you're a little person, you know, I've helped people in a domestic violence situation where I was like, sometimes, you know, you jump in the middle and, you know, you could be fearing too, but as long as you kind of keep a distance, you watch it while they're in the house, you say, just get the essentials. If you have a kid, get them. If you got a pet, you don't want to leave the pet in the situation. Yeah, you took the dog or the cat. Take them, get them out too. Just get those key essentials, get all the living beings out of the house and go. And then, like I said, you can always, you know, whatever the local, if it's United Way, if they don't have a center nearby, every little town, even a small ass town, and we're allowed to curse on the air, will have something, you know, will have something that you can do, you know, and in times of COVID, that was really hard because people didn't want to get close to it. You know, some people said, well, you know what? I don't care. A life is a life. I'm going to go help that person. You know, I'll just throw on a mask. I'll throw on a face shield, whatever. This is my best friend. This is an old friend. I don't care. Just jump in my car, sit in the back seat, whatever. If you don't have a car to help them, you said, you know what? We're just going to grab your stuff and haul ass down the sidewalk, you know, and just gather some money and call a cab. Figure out, you'll find a way to be, you know, looking for those signs. And one thing I kind of want to just touch on a little bit, like I said, you found ways to look at things. I think it's, you know, as we go into your thoughts, Kristin, maybe you could talk about like things you can do to be mindful of that person, seeing the signs. You know, if you want to touch a little bit on that, or if you want to touch a little bit about how to see the signs. Like, how do I see, especially if someone's hiding it so well? You know, but I got a feeling something's wrong, you know, the three of us, me, DeVonna, and Kristin, we have kind of very highly empathic natures. So we can kind of use that to how you do to see. And sometimes you might be wrong, but hey, at least you tried, you know. So I'll let you touch a little on that, and then, you know, any other tips on getting out of a bad situation before we move on to Andrew and wrap this topic.
Okay. I don't mean to be Debbie Downer here, but I'm going to speak the truth. I've been married to a psychologist for 43 years, and during that time, we've had a lot of friends go through a lot of rough times, rough patches, and they'll tell me, and I have most frequently referred them to my husband and for professional help. And one thing I had learned that was shocking to me at first, and now I understand it, but they would go through sessions, the time would pass, and they'd be fine again. The marriage would work out, or whatever the problem, it would work out. And then they no longer wanted to be my friend anymore. And you might be surprised at how common that is. Exactly. If you offer help, there's two things. One, if you offer help, and two, if you speak the truth, you better have one foot in the saddle, because it may not work out with all this gratitude that you're expecting for having put that out there. It's just very common. They just don't want to be associated with that point in time in their lives. So you can't go out and do something that you really, really think you're doing somebody a big favor, and you're going out on a limb for them. Just do that for itself. Don't expect that they're going to come back and be forever grateful. In many cases, you lose the friendship totally. So that is something to prepare for.
Exactly. Well, you made a good point, and I'm really glad. I don't think you're being a Debbie Downer on that at all. I think it's good that actually brings up the part about it's okay not to have that positive outlook sometimes, because in a way what you just said was positive, because in a different perspective. Especially in domestic violences, there's people where you always hear about they go back. And as a person who cares, you worry about, well, one day they're going to go back and you're never going to hear from them again. But you know what? you did something. You did something to, you reached out. You referred them to your husband. You looked at signs. And then they chose that, I don't want to be your friend because you did this. And you know what? They're good. They worked out. And maybe that abuser is, deep down, there is good in people. But whatever the reason that makes them, maybe they're narcissistic and makes them domineering, it makes them abusive, whatever it is in their heads that makes them that way, but then that person loves that person. So that's something you have to deal with, They always say, there's that saying about, if someone loses somebody, or like, let's say they lose a child to like a murder or whatever, and then they seek revenge on, well, I'm going to go after them because the cops aren't helping. They say, well, if you're going on a revenge trip and avenging, dig 2 graves. It's just like 1 foot in the saddle. Sometimes people aren't gonna. You gave them the gratitude. You showed empathy, and you know what? But you did reach out. You did something to help them. And who knows? Like I said, that person, what if down the road they do come back and they said, I'm sorry, I excommunicated you from our lives. Maybe they need you. That's one way you could say, well, I'm going to be here. I won't turn, like I always tell people, I'm not giving up on you, but sometimes you do have to step away. And if they come back, that's another form. People always talk about tough love, and when it comes to suicide, sometimes people say, well, they've been threatening for years. Well, you never know if that's the day that person actually does it. And I'm like, sometimes it'll bother me. I'll go, I'm on the ledge there with you, trying to talk you down, but then sometimes it drains you when you're helping someone so much, and then they just keep going down and they keep relapsing. Then sometimes you just have to step back, but know you did do something. I've had friends, not mentioning names, that I've gone where I've been physically drained, and I'm like, you know what? But I'm there if they reach out. I'm just not going to go down this part of the road with them, but I'm going to be here. I will listen. They can call me. They can text me, whatever, but I'm not going to drain myself if they're not going to listen, if they're not, whatever, because there's people that they'll scream at you. They'll take you down a hard thing, and you have to separate that. So yeah, you bring up a good point that it's not always going to work out. DeVonna, you have any thoughts on that a little bit, just from coming out? Like sometimes people go back, and any quick thoughts before we go to Andrew?
Excuse me. Well, yes, and I tried to make the relationship that I talked about, I tried to make it work several times, especially because there was a child involved, and I didn't know my biological father. And so I thought it was real important for my son to know his biological father. But it took 18 years before that could even, actually 21, before that could even start to come around, because that person had to change. That person had to better themselves and be in a place where he was ready to be able to be there for someone else and learn how to be there for himself. The most important thing is learning to love yourself. When you keep going back to that situation, yes, you love that person and you may love that child, but what is the best for all parties involved, really? And that's what we have to ask ourselves when we're in that situation. We may not want the outcome as it is. I didn't want to walk away. I didn't want to run. I didn't want to leave. I wanted my child. I wanted the picket fence, and so what? I was in an apartment. I don't care. I'll take a picket fence around the apartment. But you know what I'm saying is that I had an idea of what it was going to be like, and that is nothing what it was like. And so we have to let go of our attachment to what we want it to be or what we think it should be, and really look at what it is. Is this person loving me? Am I loving myself by being here? If the answers to those questions are no, please don't go back. Please, there is help out there. You can find it. And there are friends that are willing to help support you, even if in the long run, unfortunately, you decide, oh, well, I don't want to be associated with that. But a person that's really elevating themselves and really changing wouldn't push someone away like that. they would grab a hold of that person and want that person's support. So we all also have things affect us at different times. So what Kristin said to someone 10 years ago might not take effect until 2 more years down the road. So 12 years later, that person is remembering what Kristin did for them, what Kristin said or Chris said for them. And sometimes that's all it takes too, is to plant that seed in someone that you care about, because later on it will stay there, it will come back up. And that person will have that seed to grab a hold of and go, yeah, she really did care about me. He really did look out for me. And they'll be able to make the changes. So,
yeah, exactly. And even if they don't even come back to you as a friend, and they don't, maybe their pride won't say, well, I'm going to go and say, I'm sorry, Kristin. Maybe they will one day, and that would be awesome. Maybe it takes them not even 2 years. Some people, it took them 10 years for that to sink in. I've seen those situations. But, and maybe they'll never come back to you and thank you or send you something or just a phone call that says, hey, you were right, or whatever, because it could be a pride thing in their own. But that just takes us back to self-care. Think about it. These people, would you rather have people, they're not trying to interfere. They're trying to help you. We're all trying to help you. And you know what? Sometimes you can offer the gratitude, but even if you said, you know what? You can hate me. You can never talk to me again, but this is all I'm going to say, and we'll go our separate ways. But maybe one day, if you need it, I will be there for that phone call. And I hope, that they make it to where they do call you. If not, you did what you can. And it's very hard for those of us that have highly sensitive, highly empathic natures, because you feel like you want to help everybody, but it all comes back to self-care. Self-care in us, self-care, before we can help others. That person you're trying to help, they need to do their own. Maybe it could be a little thing. Maybe one day they go, man, I don't want my kid to go through this anymore. Or maybe it might take one of their kids living in that abusive environment says, Mom, I'm leaving. I'm running away from home. And losing that child is going to turn them. That means they learned the hard way. Maybe they had to hit their own rock bottom. There's so many things, but just knowing, and part of your self-care is that you did what you could. And you know deep down that person knows you're going to be there. And Kristin, that person knows you're going to be there for them. But hey, deep down, hey, they may not come back, but maybe that little seed will grow. Hopefully. Andrew, let's go ahead and, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this heavy, deep topic here. And then we're going to do our closeout.
Okay. But as far as helping people, to a friend, I think if a friend comes to you and wants to talk to you, I think the best thing that you can possibly do is not to be so judgmental. Well, because some members of my family, if I have a problem and I talk to them, well, you just need to pray more. The wrong thing to say. That's good information, but sometimes that could be a double-edged sword. I would think that in helping someone, you just listen, shut up and just listen to what they're saying, and then maybe offer some kind of solutions that might be reasonable to help. And then maybe, sometimes friends can be draining, and all I can think of is just basically just trying to be a supportive friend. And just say, well, have you tried this or this or this in the form of a question, Well, what do you think about this? It can be a complicated issue at times. And of course, there is this suicide hotline. I don't know it offhand. But by all means, if there is no one to talk to, by all means, call that.
Somebody scratching paper?
That would be me.
We're live on the air.
Just as a friend, you would just try to do the best that you can, whether it's right or wrong. That's my thought.
Yeah, exactly. There's just so many, and I think you nailed one. I think one thing I think we all kind of forgot to mention is what signs can we look for, and I think you wrapped that up, Andrew, in your comment, and in your part was like, what can we do to to see and be mindful of that someone might be going through something is just by shut up and listen. And then you said something that I thought was very important. Ask the right questions. When you listen, sometimes asking something, you'll find the answers in the question. You know, how they answered. Are they dodging? Are they deflecting? Whatever. But just listening. And like I said, if you grew up, like Andrew, you mentioned, having like a religious family, well, you just need to pray. Okay, I'm a Christian. I believe in God, and I'm all about putting, faith. But people don't always want to hear that, and sometimes you're actually going to do a disservice to that if you're telling someone, well, just pray about it. And I'm like, well, of course you can do that. But it's where religion can get crazy. Being spiritual and being, religious are two different things. They're kind of one and the same, but then they're different too. So just
almost like, what, nothing to do with it. You're like, go ahead, I don't want to deal with it. That's basically what you're telling them. It can be in that form.
And it's coming across as judgmental. And if you really think about it, if you go back to religious times, people say, oh, well, and I'm like, well, just trust God. I'm like, dude, you're not listening to me. Yeah, I do trust God. But you know what? All that person, that's part of being mindful. Listen to them. Don't judge. And if you want to offer a bit of advice, you say, you can take it or leave it. Here's my thoughts. This is what I think, or I have a feeling about. And I'm here anytime. Let's, setting up, sometimes if they're far away, you might just have to do a call or a FaceTime or something. But if they're close to you, say, let's go grab a cup of coffee. Or, hey, I'm going to come over if you're that close. Whatever. Or just a phone call. But, little things. It's the little things, people. Little things go a long way. Listening is the biggest thing that sometimes we all struggle with. I was always kind of quiet because I was always creative, and I probably didn't talk too much. And now it's like, okay, now I'm making up for lost time because now I'm talking too much. But then, I do step back and I listen. Sometimes there's things you got to get out, but then it's a two-way street. Just like we're all having a conversation. Everybody on this call, on the air with me today, has had some tidbits. That's how we're going to inspire change. So that brings me to our wrap up of our special broadcast on Inspire Change, Mindfulness, and Wellbeing from just everyday people. Let's do a little closeout. So we're going to do a 30 seconds or less wrap up closeout to end this, and then y'all just wait a second before you disconnect from the call. Mute after everybody does their 30 seconds. When I do my closing outro to close the show, just mute your mics, not now, but mute your mics after, and then we'll go off the air and we'll just have a quick 2 minutes, and then we'll end our off air part of the call. So again, let's do this is our last 30 seconds or less, starting with DeVonna, just your closing wrap up of inspiring change to all the listeners out there, and then we'll just shoot around. So we're going to go DeVonna, Kristin, you're next, and just an uplifting, mindful little mantra. You can say whatever you want in 30 seconds or less, and then we'll go back to me. And then Andrew, you'll be right before I do my closeout. Okay, DeVonna, go.
Nurture yourself, love yourself, and putting yourself first is not a bad thing. You can't help anyone else if you can't help yourself first. And so the United Way helpline that I mentioned before, it's also online. They have you can browse their resources and the community phone numbers. You can do it online in the privacy of your own home, with your phone or whatever. And then also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline that Andrew mentioned before, that hotline is 800-273-8255. 888-888-8255. Peace, love, and happiness, everybody.
Kristin.
My last thought, I guess, is that conflict cannot survive without your participation. If you will not reciprocate what is being given to you, it has nowhere to go. It'll die. So just say no to conflict. That should do it. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. And Andrew.
Yes, I want to say is I really appreciate being on this program. I want good things for everybody. I want good mental health for everybody. I want everybody to live a good and happy life, to enjoy life, to take the time to take care of yourself, your mental health. As Fraser would say, good mental health to you. Along with that, I say that too. So good things for you. Remember that if someone is in pain, try to be the best you can, non-judgmental, and peace to everyone.
All right. Okay. And if you guys will just mute your mics for a moment while I wrap up the show. We have so much, like I said, there's so much to be thankful for, everybody. Every week we have a pre-recorded show on Inspire Change with Gunter, and Gunter has his tips and topics. We just kind of came off of a turning point, and I think he's going to continue on that section. And then he talks about resilience. And of course, if you want coaching, or, for coaching, mindful coaching, for help, Gunter has his books out there. You can find them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any of your major retailers. There's Making Good Men Great, Surfing the New Wave of Masculinity. Even in his fiction books, which is the upcoming Mountains of the Sea, it also tackles on mental health in a different way. There you can rent or buy on Amazon Prime the Masculinity That Inspires Change. Not just because I directed it, but it talks on so many different things on mental health and mindfulness in different ways, and using creativity to find a better way. If you need the hotlines, you can Google United Way. Just Google the United Way helpline, or, find up and you can find that deal. I will try to edit the page on this episode later, and I'll put up some of those numbers and websites. I believe there's NAMI.org. I actually list that at the end before the credits roll on my Lifelines film that's coming out. I believe it's NAMI.org. It's a mental health, people who are battling things like depression or bipolar disorder or anything like that. There's those resources. Then there's the suicide hotline, which we just mentioned on the air, and we'll put that on the page as well. So you're not alone, and that's what's important. Reach out, take to heart that people aren't trying to control your life and run your life. We just care about each other, and just, you can take it with a grain of salt, or you can, and as you mentioned, conflict, we're all different, but you also need to, as even Kristin said, you need to learn to resolve conflict, talk it out, and then work through the problem. Take it in meditation, take it in quiet the noise, work together, and and you'll find peace. Again, thank you all listeners for listening to Inspire Change. And you can check out gunterswoboda.com. You can listen to all our episodes on any of your favorite, because we're syndicated on Apple Podcasts, we're syndicated on iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, Spotify. We're on all the major networks, whatever your favorite. Audible. You can listen to it on the go, recorded. We have special live episodes with special guests like we did today as well. Gunter will return next week with another of one of our regularly shorter episodes, and then we also have more live shows planned as well with him. Again, Thank you so much, everybody. Keep inspiring change, and never forget you aren't alone. Check out goodmengreat.com, gunterswoboda.com. If you have questions, you would like to be a guest on the show, or you have tips, you can always reach out to Miranda at noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at noirtainment, noirtainment.com. Always inspire change and find a light in the darkness. Thank you so much.
Let it go.